Okay, doors are closed. We'll get started here. Welcome to the Cloud Native session for automatedbuildings.com. I'm Scott Cochrane. I'll be your host today. And we have a fascinating topic, and we have a great group of experts here to share with us their thoughts. So Cloud Native, for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar with the topic, cloud, of course, speaks to the internet, right? So services that we get off the internet, whether it be like shopping, or if we're running a building, or whatever we're doing, the stuff we run on the internet are running on what we deem clouds. Clouds, of course, are data centers with servers in them, but we call them clouds to make it easy. And what's happened to the BAS industry over the last few years is that we are slowly becoming what I like to think of as a cloud-centric industry, which means a lot of the new products and most of the new services that are coming out have some sort of internet component to it, right? The smart home kind of showed us this early on, and now the buildings are following suit. And as they do, many of the controls that go into the buildings are connected to a cloud. And with that systemic change, with the thought that, you know, everything's going to be connected to a cloud, that's when we start to get into this cloud native conversation, which is really not just about the thought that we're moving our services to the cloud and we're connecting buildings to the cloud, but now we're looking at it in a different light, where we're actually looking at the cloud first, and then how does it apply to the building? And that's where this cloud native conversation sort of starts. And so with that, our panel of experts, we're going to dive into it. I'm going to start with David, if you'd introduce yourself and a little bit about your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So my name is David Sciarrino. I'm Vice President of Business Development at a company called KTERIO. So we are a cloud-native software platform that is really a building operating system at the end of the day. But to talk about cloud-native and my thoughts on really how you define that, I feel like it's more of a culture. So cloud native is an idea where you start with the cloud at step one, and you design your entire world around being cloud centric. So with that in mind, it's like comparing Amazon to a typical retailer. They designed to be cloud only, and you can look at how they scaled so quickly compared to a retailer who has stores that decided they're going to go on the internet as well. So being cloud native is really a commitment, and it has to start with designing everything moving forward with that foundation of all your resources being in the cloud. And if you do that, you get really unlimited scalability and unprecedented flexibility in being able to adapt. And we need that badly in the building system because as we all know, every building is completely unique, and we have to be able to adapt from building to building and portfolio to portfolio.
And could you speak to how, with your product or with the services you offer, like if you didn't have the ability to scale and aggregate data, could you speak to how important, like being a cloud-first technology, you know, as a cloud-first company, is how important the features of using a cloud are to your product, and point out some of those features?
Sure. So if you look at just data acquisition, you have to be able to collect data in a way that it's usable, and that's one of the biggest challenges we have in the smart building space, is that the data is completely different from building to building and vendor to vendor. So when you put your resources in the cloud, you can then use tools like machine learning and AI. You can apply those technologies to a very unorganized set of data, and at the end of the day, you can get results that are a very normalized and usable database, and you can do that very quickly, and you can do that very cost effectively. So when you're looking at onboarding a large portfolio for a client, they don't have to give you their data in a clean manner. You can just go find it in its existing state. And with resources in the cloud, on a cloud native platform, you're able to take advantage of the power and the computing modules and plugins that will allow you to make that data into something that is usable very quickly. And that's a big challenge in today's space.
Yeah, and David, what are some of the other challenges working with the existing BAS industry and connecting them to your cloud?
Really, it's the hardware dependency that a lot of the BAS companies have. If we look at just BMS systems that have been around for 25 years, the software that they develop are very specifically designed to the hardware they put on the wall. And decoupling that is very difficult for those companies because they've done that the same way for 25 or 30 years. And for a cloud native organization trying to get into that data, it can be very difficult, especially when a lot of those things are still proprietary. So when you do find those solutions and you need to be able to scale them quickly across a large geographic portfolio, having tools in the cloud to do that, it makes it more cookie cutter. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter from a cloud standpoint what hardware you're talking to. It's no longer a concern, it's really just the data that you're getting from that, and that becomes where the value is.
Thank you, cool. All right, Therese, let's move it over to you. Therese Sullivan from Tritium.
Yes, I'm Therese Sullivan, Customer Marketing Leader at Tritium. And probably many people in the room know Tritium Niagara. It was introduced over 25 years ago as the open protocol BAS system, and has had steady success and market expansion over those 25 years. And as open protocol solution, our business has always been data, and the move to the cloud for Tritium is not not a revolution, but more of an evolution of being able to, first of all, introduce a cloud-first architecture. That might be a vocabulary word. We could, you could be a cloud-first company, and you could be a company that has a great on-premise business, and also introduce a cloud-first architecture product. And that's what we've done with Niagara Cloud Suite. And like David is saying, we see there's a certain percentage of our customers, I call them tip of the spear customers, that have been interested in doing more analytics, especially energy managers, energy consultants that want to have years of data up in the cloud. Well, it does make sense to use the resources of the cloud to move that data to a place where you can store it to whatever degree you want, because you are paying, any cloud solution you're paying for storage, so that has to be taken into consideration. So with Niagara Cloud Suite, it is doing that ability to move things to the cloud, do tasks in the cloud, but at the rate you want to go.
Yeah, and Therese, I know like the cloud is for Tritium is I won't say it's new, but it's becoming more of a reality. But can you speak to how Niagara is not only working to be both in the cloud, but then also like the ability to go on-prem, and the relationship between the product and the cloud, and how Tritium looks at that?
Sure. I mean, we have, as the open protocol solution, almost a de facto industry standard in that respect, our customers have asked, and our partners, for us to continue to expand the footprint of Niagara. So we've been in answering this, so it's more marketable than push. Containerized Niagara is one way we're pushing data up to the cloud. And this Niagara Cloud Suite that I just discussed, it is a outbound only connection. So that's very important to IT departments. No additional gateways. You might move things up from your Jace to your Niagara Cloud. You can move things from the Jace through a container to one of our partners that are using containerized Niagara. Or you can keep things on-prem. It's really whatever they want to do.
Yeah, for sure. So who in here is familiar with what containerization is, or Docker containers? And so yeah, so interesting point, right? Niagara, why are they moving over to that type of way of rendering their software on a server? And Therese, you want to speak to that a little bit about how that's going to help you guys for scale and stuff?
Sure. Being able to move data and maybe tasks, change your architecture, the way you're deploying Niagara a little bit to perform more tasks in the cloud.
Yeah. And who's ever tried to put a web soup on the server? Web soup, anybody? So you gotta run a full VM. You need like a full Windows stack, okay? So what Tritium's doing is they're moving over to this Docker, and that's because what that's going to allow them to do is when you guys want to, say, run a new web supervisor of theirs in a cloud, no longer will you have to do all that. It'll already be in the right place, set up properly, and they can just essentially initialize it and boom, you got a full Niagara stack now running on a cloud. And you can do it in minutes instead of hours, right? And with a lot less overhead. So not only is Tritium moving their products to more connectivity to the cloud, but at the same time, they're altering the way they build their software so it works better at that level. So we can see how these cloud-centric type companies are starting to take form in our industry that way, right?
I just wanted to make one more point there. It really depends on the customer and the degree of IT support available on that customer site facilities management team. Sometimes when I talk about containers, I think about sometimes people say close are for models only, and I would say containerized Niagara is for customers that are ready to take on that IT. So if you're a small school district that's using Niagara, because Niagara is sold into every vertical market, and so you might not have the IT support to run containerized Niagara. But if you're an enterprise and you have a data center already and you have staffed people that want to deal with the licensing that goes on with containers and updating software, then containerization is just a super economical, good way to go.
Yeah, so very interesting. Thanks, Therese. All right, let's move it over to Tavis. Tavis, brief introduction.
Yeah, Tavis Kerr with KODE Labs, VP of Building Systems and Engineering. So when KODE Labs formed, our goal wasn't to build this structure of limitation to clients. So that's where cloud native came into play with having various databases, various microservices to interact with one another, that we could build applications specific to client use cases or what their integrations were within a building system. So that helped us deliver digital commissioning and FDD and various products to them specifically. And it also gave us a way to give a BAS interface in a cloud environment, provide a mobile app to users, and really then standardize what's being delivered to clients across the portfolio by implementing an ontology, standardizing the data that's being ingested so that it can be streamlined in how we process it and how we handle it for the end goal, which is the client's use cases.
So Tavis, in your role, you have, your KODE is a native cloud service. In order for it to work, you have to get data from real buildings, real systems up into the cloud. So could you speak to some of the complexity in our industry in regards to moving data from an existing building platform up to a cloud?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a wide range of buildings that have a full converged building network with segmented VLANs, or buildings that maybe just the BAS installers install their own subnet network within the building. Both of those have challenges, and so it's working with an IT team that's on site to understand how are we going to make a secure connection to the building, getting the buy-in from those teams that, hey, we're SOC 2.0 compliant, we follow all the network standards needed, and so when we connect to that building, we're really looking to pull this data securely. Here are our functions, this is how we operate. And today, most of the systems that we're facing are also still cloud-based. The IoT sensors, building softwares are already tied into the cloud, so we're doing cloud-to-cloud API integrations that a lot of them don't even connect directly to the building.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So that means that you could literally have sensors in a building talking to its own cloud, and then you could have, say, an instance in Niagara doing a BAS talking to a different cloud.
Correct.
And then you guys integrate the clouds together into your cloud.
That's it.
This is getting very confusing, isn't it? No, not too bad. No. So
We have customers that have asked us to do that.
it is. It's kind of like so when we first started integrating as a community, we were like kind of MOM and BACnet together, and then we started doing enterprise integration. So we started doing LDAP and different enterprise level services that we'd integrate to, and now we're integrating servers, clouds to clouds, right? So it's just we just keep seeing the industry evolve in different ways from a software standpoint and how we get these systems to collaborate with each other. And the cloud to cloud is sort of like the latest and greatest, and very interesting. And just real quick, Tavis, and not to throw you for too big of a loop, but when you go cloud to cloud like that, what happens to cybersecurity there? Is that like, how do you do that? Like, I just thinking out loud a little, but like, what do you do to secure the connection between these clouds?
Yeah, so there's API standards and requirements. So there's a process of reviewing what API documentation is available, what data and details specifically that we need to ingest. Maybe it's not the entire full stack of the API, maybe it's specific data points. And using that along with some secure connections of credential authentication or even a VPN to another vendor's cloud to ensure that that secure data is passed between each other.
Every connection has a consideration, right, Tavis? Whether it be from cloud to cloud, building to cloud, even within the building from say a local area network to a wide area network. Each one of these is a point where we have to look at cybersecurity, look at the connections, and it is complicated, but it's a part of the business now, right? It's just a part of doing this cloud business.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can't expect to connect to a client and provide them a mobile app and an interface without having to consider how it affects the security of that data that's leaving the building and the control that may be coming back into the building. So yeah, it's a very big concern and something that we deal with daily on trying to resolve.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tavis. Good stuff. Okay, let's push it over to Stephen now. Stephen.
Thanks, Tavis. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Dawson-Haggerty. I'm the CEO of Normal Software. We make a product that's a great segue into some of the problems we solve. But today I think I wanted to focus a little less on what exactly cloud native means, because whatever it's debatable, it probably involves the cloud and containers. I think we can all agree on that much anyway. And more on what some of the implications I think in the VAS world are. I would say historically integrations have been pretty difficult in the VAS community because there's been low-level protocols and stuff has been local and there hasn't been a lot of scale. And when things are hard, you don't do as many of them. Once this stuff moves to the cloud with some of the technologies like the Panelists mentioned, they become a lot easier. And I think a natural result of that is you get more integrations and more asks for integrations. And so the other thing that happens is you start to see fewer monolithic systems where you try to do everything inside of Metasys or whatever, Desigo or Diagram and Supervisor, and you start to see different functions being bought and implemented by different products, which is very natural. And that kind of reflects what you see in other industries. And what I think is kind of interesting is I think we kind of know what a lot of these applications are in the VAS space. Initially you see stuff like remote connectivity, very simple, right? I can adjust the set point from my house, I can log in. Then you start to see more and more complex stuff coming in where you want to have some over-the-top sensors from LoRa that has a cloud API, not a backend API. You've got analytics that you want to deliver using the cool new, analytics startup, not rather than, what's baked into an existing product. You want to see advanced optimization. You want to see CMMS integration. You want to see different kinds of enterprise integrations, mentioned LDAP. And so you really end up with this very complicated web of integrations pretty quickly. That's, I think, both enabled by and kind of a natural consequence of moving everything to the cloud, because it's easy, and then people see that it's easy, and then they want more of it, right? And so that, I think, is basically a fact. And so, what does this really mean for us, right? It means that you need to have some ability to prepare and plan for these integrations to make sure they will be secure, and you've got some data governance and security and reliability involved, even though you might not really know what all those are. Maybe it will be a successor to demand response. And so that's part of the problem that we're working on solving with Normal Framework, which is to solve both this local integration where you've got stuff on the site that now needs to talk not just to one cloud usually, but ideally to multiple vendors' clouds so that you can cut out middlemen and have a simpler security concept, as well as then tying together some of these cloud-to-cloud APIs and doing that in a way that's accessible to developers and community.
Cool. So you mentioned data. Excuse me. How, like with your product, how important is data organization to getting a cloud system working properly in terms of like the building and the, you know, the relationship with the cloud? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah,
How
so
messed up is it right now? Just give
the data organization. Well, you know, the data organization at some level is super important, right? Because you want to deploy some product that has some expectations about the data that it needs and the control it needs. And so there's a lot of, that's why there's so much talk in the industry about ontologies. Our philosophy though is that, you know, for that to work here is you have to tie that labor and that work to, you know, tag things or model your data or whatever you want to call it, do that integration. You know, to the point in time when somebody's got a business case for buying that app. If you tell everybody up front that we've got to build a digital twin that, you know, has every rivet in the building in it, it's just too expensive and then people get scared off. And so our focus is giving people the tools so when they have the business case, they can say, hey, we don't have to go from zero, which is, you know, going out to the long bus and finding all of our network variables and tying it into the cloud. We can start at 50 or 60% wherever it was left after construction, and, you know, really quickly get that data ops, which is another sort of part of, you know, cloud native, done, so we can do that integration efficiently.
So a good, like a building that has a good, properly managed data set sort of has it future-proofs the building for the future of what clouds may come, right? Depending on what happens in the future.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be flexible, and you know, and part of it also is just that then you'll know it's there, and so that when you go to a company and say, you know, sir, I'd like to buy your analytics product, you know, you can tell them what you got. They can tell you whether or not it's going to work, and you can have some predictability about what it's going to take to finish the integration, which I've seen as a huge challenge for these portfolio rollouts, where you get, you know, somebody sends you a spreadsheet of 100 buildings and asks you, you know, what can your product do? And sort of looks at their feet and says, well, we'll have to check.
Yeah, very true, very true. Cool, thank you. All right, Lenny, I saved you. Take the mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lenny. I'm a founder of Greenole. So Greenole itself is a cloud-native platform that we built for building management systems. And I think it's key for us to understand, you know, we talk about cloud-native, what cloud-native is, and define it in different ways. I mean, there is one way of defining cloud-native. But I think we also need to understand what building management systems mean, right? So if you think about a connected building, and you step back, the only things that you can connect in a building, or literally everything you can connect in a building, has to be either a mechanical device or an electrical device, right? And way back in the 80s and 90s, when all of this was still black, I can tell you that we had pneumatic systems. And when you went to the building and said, I had a building automation system, it was a complete pneumatic system of a control system that was being managed. And that was a building automation system. But it focused just on the HVAC and the controls. And that converted to DDC into the future. And even today, when we talk about control systems today, we're talking about control systems specifically of temperature controls in the building. Meanwhile, there are other trades going on there. There's the electrical side that's using Modbus and other stuff, and there's information being floated out there. There's also information being floated from every single IoT device you can think of, right? Including, I mean, weighing scales, coffee machines, they are all communicated up into the cloud, right? So what we do within Greenole is we build a cloud-native building management system that takes relevant information from a building and applies it to what the occupant wants to do with it. So there is a cloud-native mindset you've got to think about in terms of how is cloud-native transforming within the building control system and how you do controls. How is the cloud-native applying to the electrical systems and how that's being done. And you've also got to step back and say from a building management system, how do you do it, right? So, and if you think about the number of industries out there, so I think of control systems, and I say there are probably, what, 10, 15 controls manufacturers out there. Yeah. There are a bunch of fire alarm manufacturers, security manufacturers. So I can pick any particular building here on the server, and I will have a combination of maybe 30, 40 manufacturers with technicians that have all their own ways of doing things. So all of a sudden, you're trying to cook this whole thing or eat this whole elephant, and it becomes extremely complex. So I know I have business partners here who all have software companies, and we tackle it from different angles. And there's a reason why we have to tackle it from different angles. So I think it's important to understand those aspects of it, right? And the other part that I would just like to add on is in terms of whether it's the building control system or your your electrical system or whatever system that's out there, when you want to build it into a cloud-native environment, you have to make sure that the software that is doing the application is written within the cloud-native environment. So you heard David talk initially saying, you've got to start off with a cloud-native mindset. So if you do that, you will quickly realize that every single building management system or building control system that's out there, they were not written in the cloud-native environment. And because they're not written in the cloud-native environment, they cannot operate in the cloud-native environment. And there are limitations to it, so I'll just use an example, right? So this could have been the boiler room, where we typically had a computer, and you had software downloaded onto it, and that was the software you used to manage your building management system. At some point in time, we took this and said, I'm going to put this at this server location, but it is still residing in a hard drive at that server location. And so once I have that, that is a cloud-based system. Once I start having multiple buildings reaching into this software, at some point in time, the server begins to slow down and you cannot scale up. So that's why you have multiple servers, you have containers in each one of them, and you have an application that's written across those so it can operate out of multiple servers at the same time, then you can scale up. So just want to kind of give that perspective, right?
Sure, and scale is super important because as we've developed more products that have Ethernet and faster communication networks with more bandwidth, guess what? We're getting more data back. And the need to be able to scale that data with analytics and moving over to AI wants all the data, right? They don't want us to chop out little pieces. AI wants it all. So as we continue to feed these engines with data, we have to scale these servers or the cloud accordingly, and it's super important, right, to have that capability at the cloud to enable that. Very cool. So, okay, so first topic real quick, I wanted to throw at all of you individually, and we'll kind of hit with some questions, but I'll start with David again. Just cybersecurity in general, a couple of things. You know, you call on customers, you're working with them on connecting their data to the cloud. Could each of you speak a little bit to the situation going on with cybersecurity today? What are you seeing? What are the trends? What are the owners telling you?
Yeah, it's a huge topic, and the owners in most cases don't know what to tell us because they're now just realizing they don't have a good cybersecurity policy. And that's the reality. So when they have someone like us come to them and say, we're going to collect data from your building systems, they can wrap their head around that because that's data coming out of the building. And as long as that's done in a secure fashion, it's not as big of a problem. Where we get into a much longer discussion is when we tell them, not only do we want to collect that data, we want to do something useful with that data, and we want to come back into those building systems and make changes autonomously. Then they say, okay, hold on a second. You want a VPN tunnel back into our hospital, for example. We say yes, right? That's a different discussion. They haven't had people ask that question a lot because a lot of software solutions are just take the data, put it in the cloud, and look at it. Now we want to reach back in and we want to do something that drives an outcome. So they're putting policies in place now to deal with that. They're not saying no. They're realizing that we have to make allowances for this kind of interface with not only KTERIO, but with other vendors in the future, because this is where things are moving to. And they understand, especially in healthcare, that when you get to connected medical devices, that's data leaving the building, but when doctors need to get back in and push information back to nurses or other staff remotely, that's something they have to tackle now. So it is a very fluid and moving situation, but coming to them with a lot of good documentation helps, and helping them to write their policies, we've found, has also been a very big benefit. So if you come with a very strong cybersecurity background, you almost end up doing consulting with these clients just to get your own system connected in some cases.
Yeah, for sure. Can I just skip you all? I want to go to Lenny with the same question. Lenny, your client, cybersecurity, again, same question. What type of conversations have you had?
So one of the things you have to think about from cybersecurity standpoint is that once you're within the IT network, right, every single IP's point is a hackable point. Right? So once you go into the cloud native environment, and for you to be cyber secure, and you're putting stuff in a cloud-based server somewhere, as an entity, you've got to worry about all the compliances from SOC 2 to 3, and ISO, and all of that stuff. So the way we've tackled it is we use AWS, right? And they've got that down pat. And we use their services, so I don't have to go get the SOC 2, SOC 3 compliance, right? So they take care of that. The other aspect of it is within the way we've designed our platform, we do not get into the critical parts of the building that could disrupt the building entirely. So that's also a key point. So you have a building control system, and Trillium can do a great job in making that building control system very cyber secure, but it's only as cyber secure as how many points are opened up from there, right? So what we try to do is we try to stay away from reaching into all those information. And we have APIs that just take specific information that doesn't affect the operability of that particular device.
Sure.
So you gotta look at it from different perspectives and approach it, right?
Yeah, very logical too.
Yeah, that's right.
Partnering with a huge data company like
That's it.
AWS, and then not touching everything just to touch everything in the building, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Okay,
right.
Just you hyper integrators out there.
That's what I tell my kids too.
I tell them, but it doesn't help. But yeah. So
And Scott, to expand on what Lenny just said,
Yeah.
we find that 20, 30 years ago when these buildings were built, there was no consideration given to, we have a BMS network that's on Ethernet, and we have all of our hospital records are on Ethernet.
Right.
Should those be VLAN? Yeah, they should have been. 95% of our clients haven't really done that. So that's something that it's very difficult to do after the fact. And that's why it's hard to say we only want to reach into this one spot, but that spot is on the same network with everything else you don't want to touch. It's hard to avoid sometimes.
And it's good to understand history because you think about it, you've got an IT network, you've got an OT network. In the days of pneumatics, the OT network was just air. They didn't tie into anything, right?
it was open.
Yeah, that's right, open systems, right?
That's right. Nobody can control pressure. Well, we can control pressure, right, industry?
That's right.
That's our job, is to control pressure. So we can control it. But all right, Steve, anything to add to this on cybersecurity as a platform provider?
Yeah, certainly. I think the cloud native sort of mantle includes a lot of other techniques for cybersecurity that are really relevant here, and then we as sort of a middleware can help to implement, because you can really easily start to do things like take a backend network where, backend's pretty open, you're on the network, like kind of do whatever you want, right, to some set points, you don't really know what they are. You can start to layer, network segmentation, access control policies on top of that, and restrict what people can do, and then provide, and I think that's critical when you start talking to cloud providers, that you can provide them some sort of limitation, some sort of, auditability of the scope that they've got of that integration, so you can say to the owner, you as a cloud provider, we used to do this too, actually, I invented a backend firewall for company, right? You could sort of configure it that way. And, you can say to the owner, hey, your integrator has configured the roles that this cloud provider is going to get in your building. They can, read temperature set points in these floors or something. But they're not able to turn on the building or, fire up the chiller or whatever. And, having that separation of duties, I think, is a real valuable, it's both a core kind of cloud security principle and something that's very useful for building trust with owners, because you basically put them back in the driver's seat where they can tell, they know there's some confidence what you're actually able to do.
Yeah, for sure. So kick it over to Tavis real quick. So Tavis, you've been supporting a ton of different building owners with their cloud connections. Your building owners that you're supporting, what type of cybersecurity concerns do they bring to your attention?
Similar to what's been mentioned, but it's really about what data is going to be exposed, what the functionality of the data will be with command control back. And it's a conversation that we have with the IT team to understand, when we make a connection, we try to establish this VPN connection, but we want to NAT so that we don't even see the internal IP addresses of the building network, to really separate ourselves and just see a single component of the network, as you mentioned, just talking to the gateway. But everything runs through the IT, we find, and once we get buy-in from IT that, security, sound, it makes sense. We position that, hey, we can enable single sign-on from a user level. We have activity log around what's being completed, what changes are being made. You know, it's really easy to get the buy-in then about, hey, the benefits are kind of outweighing the levels of security that are in place, because we're going to get some good results out of this as a client.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
All right. Can I just add one more thing that's kind of relevant? Is, you know, at the end of the day, we're trying to problem solve. We're trying to solve problems, right? That's what we're trying to do. So just to give you an example, right? If you have an air handling unit in some building, and it's a critical area in that building, I'll be concerned if at some point in time the air handling unit fails. And I want to be able to know prior to it failing, and you hear about predictive maintenance and a whole bunch of stuff. There are multiple ways to look at it. There's one way whereby you're monitoring the performance of the motor and how well it has been degrading, and then based on that you can come up and say, guess what, it's going to fail at so time. You can also decide to measure current off of it and see what the amp draw is and see if there's degradation happening. Now both of those paths that I just talked about, you would have to tie in to the control system, you would have to tie into that motor, right? But I could also solve that same problem using vibration sensors, and I don't have to touch anything. So what I could do is I take vibration sensors, put it right on the motor, send it by MQTT or LoRaWAN network right up to the cloud, and do the Fourier analysis in there, and then predict exactly when that's going to fail. And I can then use that to give the relevant information to make that use case without touching the building IT network.
Yeah.
So we got to think about what's available to us in the technology today and adapt it to actually solving some problems, right?
Yeah, Lenny, you bring up a good point. I often let integrators know if you decide to put that on the owner's network, you have infinite cybersecurity concerns ahead of you. It never ends, right? An unprotected instance of software on an owner's network that's connected to the internet, you might as well ask to be hacked, okay? And don't take this the wrong way, Therese, but there's a lot of Niagara Jaces that got put in buildings that were put on owners' networks that were exposed to the internet. What is Tritium doing about all that mess? I mean, you guys are clouds in everybody's building, right? Like, so how is Tritium working to help cybersecure that? Its framework for that.
Right. I mean, cybersecurity, any product manufacturer can only train people, explain to people what they need to do to keep things cyber secure. The component of the component of cybersecurity that's on the onus of the owner is also great. But Tritium has built-in defense in depth for ever since Niagara 4, and with each release we add all the we check out vulnerabilities because we're very involved with NIST and the other white hat sort of organizations that let you know ahead of time, and we push out those announcements and corrections to let all of the entire Niagara customer base know what to do. Whether they'll do it, we can't go in there and do that for them. We can't update their software if they're not going to keep up to date with the hacks. When we hear Microsoft or Apple or Google tell us we've got to update our phone software because of a vulnerability, we do it right away. Well, it's not that easy for a building. So we try to build in what we can, and I will say, interesting point that Lenny made, on our cloud solution, it is Microsoft Azure is one of the first clouds we're supporting. And with that, you get role-based access. So if you're a system integrator and you want to put multiple customers on your cloud, you can make sure, I think they call it principle of least privilege. Who gets data? They just get the data that they need to do their work. And that kind of that's table stakes with the Microsoft thing. There is the idea, which kind of came in also, you have to know this lingo for BACnet SC certificates. So the idea of chain of trust that comes through certificate handling, that's all built into Niagara. Data is encrypted, data in movement and data at rest, everything is encrypted. Multi-factor authentication, just like we have to do on our phones. IDs, in Niagara, that you have to put, use your PC as well as your phone to get that multi-factor authentication. Just today, we made an announcement about ISA Secure. We achieved a new certification that are looking at our development processes, a third-party accredited third-party from the International Society of Automation, ISA, has certified Tritium for its development processes, for building security into the product, and most importantly about the VPN and the Niagara Cloud Suite is it's an outbound only connection. We're not asking people to have another VPN.
That was really good, Teresa. I can't believe you remembered all that. That was really good. We've used Niagara for years, and I can tell you that secure by default has become sort of a term that we learned from Tritium, and that's sort of something that we can all learn from as we move into this cloud industry is secure by default, right? We come into the solution securely. Let the how it breaks down unsecure us, but we always start with a secure solution. And the nice thing about Niagara is everybody's always trying to hack it. So the poor people at Niagara are consistently being hit with attacks, which means they are consistently updating their software, right? Which is the most important thing for cybersecurity is updates, consistent updates to alleviate the continued growing threats of cybersecurity. For those of you who haven't heard this, 85% of the businesses in the United States this year had a cybersecurity incident. Most of them are geopolitical, folks. Most of them are coming from other countries, okay? We're not talking about kids in their basement screwing around. We're talking about nation states trying to hack into our buildings to create disruption for our businesses. And guess what, folks? You're all in the crosshairs. So as we move to this cloud world, cybersecurity is going to become a huge issue to this industry, and we have to get better at it as an industry. Sorry to be the preacher, but we just see a lot of things, and it's time for us to wake up a little as an industry on this. So, all right, great. So we have just a few minutes. I got an audience question? Sure, go ahead.
I feel like this is a dumb question, but I'm a building owner. Why in hell would I want my data outside my building?
Yeah, the question is, as a building owner.
I thought this was a way of doing everything. I don't understand why you want to do that in the first place, because I don't know if they said anything about it.
Great question.
Maybe the vibration control on the motor, but other than that, why else would
Great question. So why would a building owner want to have their data outside the building? Would any of you like to take that?
I'll try. I'll take that one,
Sure.
one first. So like the advantages of moving data outside the building are numerous. Really comes to data collection, being able to store data for extensive periods of time to be able to go back and analyze. Implementing of services, whether it's a fault detection or some sort of analytics, can be applied not just for one building, but it can be applied across your portfolio, right? So when you look at a portfolio view of your buildings, now you get a larger picture to understand what's happening in all of those separate buildings. And then you get updates. You know, your software that sits on that computer in the basement that you're talking about, it's not getting updates all the time. I mean, just this year we released a full UI update for all users at no cost, and it's just some advantages and incentives of having that cloud interface is to keep improving the operation, the function of what's being delivered to you. And then finding ways to work with a client directly as to what do you need to see out of the building, not just BAS related, but to what are the other softwares in your building, what's your work order management, your other systems that you can really drive a use case solution to help you solve a problem that you're dealing with that maybe just the BAS in your building is not solving for you.
Yeah. Panelists, any other advantages?
I can answer that with just kind of a quick analogy. 10 years ago, I wish I bought Bitcoin. Okay, 10 years from now, building owners are going to wish they had 10 years of their building data ready to be applied to any number of hundreds of software and analytics and AI platforms that are now available. So if you don't start collecting the data now, you don't know what you don't know in the future. And there's no harm in having that data in a cloud environment. Nobody really cares how often you ran your chiller, right? We're not talking about critical business data here. Nothing's proprietary. It's just data. So collect it now because you'll want it in the future.
anybody already building software that does analytics like that?
There's a lot of analytics. A lot of us up here leverage analytics today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Therese.
I was just going to talk about that. There's so many different building types, and from the small schools to a full enterprise of 10,000 people. If you look at what they call VMS, video management software, for access security, they went to the cloud about 5 years ago. That a lot of products became available because, of course, video is very copious, like lots and lots of data, and the idea of storing it in the cloud makes sense for video data. And they could see the curves 5 years, 10 years later of who adopted. And there was a little bit of a breakdown where some of the smaller buildings that don't have a BMS at all, that the cloud first, cloud only, it made BMS all of a sudden accessible to buildings that never had cloud, never had a BMS at all, brand new things. So it makes sense in some of the small places. Medium size, gradually they look at it more critically and say, do we need to, when do we need to? And that's where, when we're talking about the hybrid, it's not market push, it's we want this, can you give it to us, Niagara and Tritium, and we're giving it to them. But it's definitely those customers that want it, and I'd say in that mid-range, 200 to 1,000 type people or company, that they're more skeptical, but they're trying it out, tasting it. And this, I'm talking about what has already happened in video. And then departments of defense and great big organizations and enterprises, they're like, no, we want to hold all our data. We don't want it going into, whether be it Amazon or be it Microsoft, we want all our data, and we have the interior data center and people to man that securely. So no thank you on the cloud. So it kind of, there is a sweet spot, and we're going to see it in 5 years, how much goes to a cloud, but I do see it as a continuum and not a revolution.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate David's point. And the reality is that the great services that will drive our industry going forward are going to be cloud-based. Your chiller that's going to be connected to a cloud, it's going to be not there to maybe do efficiency, it may be there as part of a warranty in the future, right? As part of the way that the equipment works now, where it has to. Think about your car, folks. Every one of your cars, if it was bought, say, in the last 4 or 5 years, is technically connected to the internet. So, yeah, there's a good probability every chiller you buy in about 5 years, it will be connected to the internet just like your cars are today. And so it's just a change. We'll get used to it. There's going to be some hurdles, but right now, I think for those who jump on early, and again, similar to David's point, it's sort of like an early Bitcoin. It's sort of like an early Amazon environment. There's a lot of ground that we're going to gain as an industry as we start to harvest this massive amount of data we have and bring it up to the cloud and truly bring computing power to it. It's going to change how we look at every service in the building. So I'm excited about the cloud. I think it's going to be probably the biggest game changer of my career. And it has been, actually. Frankly, I started in the industry in pneumatics. I moved into DDC. I had a freaking Apple IIe computer stuff, like back then. So as soon as I got Niagara and they gave me a web server, it was on. And it's been that way for 20 years. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, right? You just woke up one day and you're like, wait a minute, I'm not in the building, I'm in the internet now. This is a whole new world for me. And it's exciting and fun and just fraught with opportunities. So with that, I'd like to thank my panel.
Can I just say one more word?
Okay,
What you're saying, Scott?
Sure.
So I started in the industry about 24 years ago, and I can tell you, in the construction industry as a whole, and I'm not bragging about it, but I think the building automation guys are essentially the smartest people in the construction industry, right? I can tell you that for a fact, right? They can figure out, if you can figure out pneumatics, and you can figure out how to control systems through pneumatics, I think you're pretty damn smart. And what has happened is technology has been introduced into the atmosphere, into our environment now. We've not been embracing it. And our share of technology in the building has gone from what it was like 90-95% all the way to 10-15% that we control, and the rest of it is all floating out there. And he says anyone that can figure it out it is the building automation guys there. And that's one of the reasons why we need to embrace these technologies. And if I can figure out how to make cloud native work, and I'm not extremely smart, I can tell you that we can do some amazing things with cloud native solutions, right? And that is what I just embrace it, look into it, and you'll be amazed at what the IoT has to offer and how simple and how simplistic it is compared to the way you would have been writing GPL programming for a DX9100 or something like that, right? Yeah. So, sorry, Scott.
No, thank you, Lenny. That's a great closing. So thank you panelists, thank you audience. We'll be up here.